What's up everyone, Brandon with Grizzly Works RC, and in this video I'm going to be going over the installation of the new SCX24 V3 LCG set. It is a little bit different than the previous versions of this. The V1 is still going to be available as a little bit lower cost. This one's going to be a few dollars more just because of the cost of materials. Some differences that we have, for one, is the material itself is going to be PA12, which is a nylon material. It's much stronger, super lightweight, and has a really nice finish to it, a nice smooth texture. The couple of other changes that are going on with it: the rear tray is a bit shorter to allow for the installation of the axial trailer hitch that is included with their new trailer for these trucks. Previous one was a little bit longer and used the mounting position that the trailer hitch uses. So now this is shorter. It only lost one, see if the camera will focus on there. It only lost one mounting point for the rear shock on the back, which honestly, I don't think I've ever used that in any of the setups that I've done with these. So wasn't a big loss there, but gained some extra functionality with it. Some other differences, well, another big difference is on the front, there is actually a small hole here. That is for a limiting strap mount, which included with this set is going to be a screw to put into that limiting strap mount, or into that hole, and then 3 different size limiting straps, as well as the Velcro for attaching the battery to the front tray. You don't have to use that Velcro. You can actually use the Velcro strap that came with the truck, but yeah, if you wanted to. But I personally like just having the Velcro on the tray itself so that you can easily take the battery in out of it. All right, so let's get into the installation. I'm doing this on a pretty much stock SCX24 Bronco, and it's a fairly quick installation. There's not a whole lot to it. I'm gonna kind of blow through just the disassembly of it, just because I'm assuming that if you're ready to take the step of replacing some chassis parts, you're probably okay with taking the body off and doing the other basic things. Yeah, I mean, really, even the wheels can stay on. The body just needs to come off for clearance while sliding different parts on and off. Real quick run over the tools that you're going to need. If you do decide to take the wheels off, you'll need your 4mm hex, or 4mm socket there. And then for all of the screws, you'll need a 1.3mm hex driver. Some other things you might need is, if you are using the stock servo, you will need to get a cable extension for it because it is too short. You may also want some tweezers. It'll help with installing the limiting straps, which I'll go over later in the video. Also, some double-sided foam tape. I've always known this as servo tape, but that'll be to mount the receiver back into the truck. So I'll go ahead and get into it. So the trays you'll need to remove are the battery tray and the front ESC tray. You'll also need to remove the ESC out of here. Already have that disconnected. Go ahead and disconnect your lights and your servo from there, and that will pop right out. It'll take a little more work than that, but I've already had this out of the truck. So once you get this front tray out, you're also going to want to get the body mount off of there, because that'll be used on the new front tray. And then you'll also need to remove these shock towers on the back. The rear tray is actually going to replace all of your shock mounting. Okay, so for the front, if you are going to be using a limiting strap, you are going to need to remove the screw holding this on. You can use it with the stock Y-link, or you can also use it if you have the truck 4-linked. It's the same process. You just have to remove whatever is mounted here so that you can put the limiting strap under this part. So that will allow the front axle to stay kind of sucked up to the truck, especially when you're going uphill. It won't allow the front axle to unload, but it'll still give you side-to-side articulation. So with this, it is the, like I said, or like you saw, the Bronco, which is the same wheelbase as the JLU and the C10 for that truck, the best way to set this up is actually to take the longest limiting strap and stick it right around that link. Let it sit there, and then you're going to get your drive shaft and your link put back together. And make sure when you put your drive shaft back together that this link or this strap is not over the drive shaft. All right, now that that's done, and got all that back together, you're going to take your front tray and the screw that comes with this kit. And for this particular setup, the screw is going to go in the front side. You can also do it in the back side of the bar right here. That hole goes all the way through. It'll just depend on the setup that you have as far as what will work best. And it's kind of just a little bit of trial and error. So you just run that screw in there. Now these holes that are on here will probably be pretty tight the first time you're putting a screw in there. There's a couple of things that you can do. You can use like a set of tweezers just to kind of poke through the hole to kind of get a little bit of a divot in there. You can also take a small screw, like the black ones that came off of here, these little screws that come off the truck, and kind of just start the threads on the holes. The reason they're so tight is so that it's much harder to strip these holes once they're that way, as well as it bites onto the screw a little bit better. So you're creating threads when you're putting these screws in for the first time. I experimented with the holes being a little bit bigger and always came up with the same issue where they were too loose for the truck and they would eventually start to back out. So this front one goes in. You'll see the holes will line up perfectly with these holes on the chassis or on the frame rails. And that's what we're going for on here. And don't worry about that limiting strap yet. First, go ahead and get, the best way that I've found is to get one of the shocks mounted on here first so that it holds the front axle in place. And as far as shock setup, again, it's kind of going to be experimental based on what you like and how you want the truck to perform, and what setup you have, because this kit will work with just about any SCX24 setup as long as it is the stock frame rails. So whether it be the long wheelbase from the Power Wagon or the Gladiator over there, or if you are running a short wheelbase, or even like this one I have here is a super stretched wheelbase, and it is actually running this kit as well. So it's a pretty versatile kit. It allows for a lot of adjustment as well, which is nice. And then you can start threading your screws in. So it allows for a lot of adjustment and allows just to really fine tune the truck without having to go to a full chassis replacement. Just because that's quite a bit more work. I mean, at this point, I'm less than 15 minutes into the video and almost done with this installation. So when you are tightening down these screws, make sure you don't go super crazy over tight on them, because you will strip out the holes. This is still plastic. It is a nylon based material, so there is that potential there to strip these holes out. All right, so the reason for the tweezers is it allows you to grab this limiting strap. Now typically what I would do is I would run the limiting strap either straight up from the front or straight up from the back. But because of where this sits on this particular wheelbase, the best way to do this is actually to bring it up over and strap it onto there, because it allows for a little bit of droop still, but it still holds your chassis or your axle in place. So, and then you still get your full articulation, which with this being a stock 3-link setup, there's not a whole lot that you get out of that. But when you start getting to like crazy flex out of trucks like this, it still keeps even though you can pull it down further if you really need to, it still keeps your side-to-side flex. For the rear tray, it just slides right in. There's channels on here that match up with the channels on the chassis or on the frame rails. So this just slides right into place, and the holes that are on here will line up. You want to line up the furthest forward hole with this one right here, and that will give you plenty of clearance for your motor, as well as some larger motor options like an 050. It's cut out to be able to take an 050 motor as well. On this back one, it can technically be run with just one screw in each side, but I personally like to do the furthest forward screw and the furthest back screw, just to make sure that it's held in there really tight. But once everything's mounted up, I have run like the Gladiator here with the older version of it. I've been running that for probably a year and a half now with only one screw in either side. So it will still hold it, and that thing has taken huge tumbles and not had an issue. So it really just comes down to what you want. As the other thing that you can get with this is the rear shock can, the screws on the side here can interfere with the rear shock depending on where you place it on or which mounting hole you use for the uppers. And that's just going to be kind of a trial and error, but all three of these holes will line up with the holes on the frame rails, so you can use any of those holes. Once that's on, just go ahead and get your shocks mounted, and this installation is just about done, honestly. So depending on how much experience you have with doing this, it is very possible to get this whole kit installed in less than 20 minutes and be ready to have it out on the rocks pretty much right away. So, and the reason for the foam tape is honestly for if you are running an 050 motor on here, it'll come all the way back, and you want this to sit a little bit higher than the tray, and it's, I mean, we're talking less than a millimeter difference in height, so that it clears the motor, so that it's not bumping into it. And there is a specific way that you need to put this on the rear tray here. Otherwise you will definitely have issues with your battery reaching. So you want your battery and motor plugs to be towards the front of this tray. And you're going to push it all the way up against the back here. And just stick that down, make sure you're centered on there. And then give it a little pressure, and that will stay on there. An 050 motor will fit underneath it with no problem. And make sure you plug your motor wire back into the motor slot, not the one that says battery or bat on there, because if you get those mixed up, you will fry your ESC. For the Velcro, or hook and loop, whatever you want to call it, I always put the rough side on the truck and the soft side on the battery or whatever I'm mounting to the truck. And this, you can just kind of get it centered on here, because since it's Velcro, you can kind of reposition stuff once it's stuck to this. I almost forgot the servo wire here. That actually runs, if you look under here, there's a little channel there. And the servo wire can run right through there. Just make sure you leave yourself enough slack for the servo to be able to move up and down with your axle. And then just stick down the Velcro over top of it, and that will leave that hanging there. Take your extension if you're running the stock servo. If you're running an aftermarket servo, it's going to come with a much longer set of wires, so you won't have to worry about this step, because you'll have plenty of extra cable there, or extra wire there. So you just plug that in. On this particular one, white and yellow go together, black and red, or brown and black go together. And I just tend to stick this down here, run my extra slack back behind here into this tray, and white wire goes up top on here, because that is your signal wire. and it goes into channel 1, or on this one it even says steering, but channel 1 is always your steering. On the Bronco, the interior will actually clear this setup. On the Power Wagon and the Gladiator, you will have to either modify the interior or remove it completely in order to fit this back here, because it will hit the back side or the back of the interior. And by modify it, I mean you're going to have to cut a good chunk of it out to be able to fit the wires, or so the wires have room in there, because it will just barely touch the top of this. With doing this, if you're looking for a good performance gain, removing the interior isn't actually a bad thing, because it will take some of that weight off the top side of these bodies, which is a big deal. All right, so after all that's done, you want to get your battery. When you're putting your battery in, you want it to sit with these cables off to this side, and you want your actual plug that's going to go into here to be up top so that it has plenty of space to stretch out to here. And you want to mount this just right to the middle, or somewhere close to the middle, because again, you can kind of slide it side to side to fit centered on here. And then it'll just mount like that, and you can plug it in and kind of run this cable this way. I typically actually have a small rubber band around here that holds this cable down in place so that it's not flapping around, and typically I cut this off of there. Some of the first generations of this truck came with a battery with a shorter cable, and it will only work on this kit if it's used with one of the short wheelbase trucks, so either the anything but the Gladiator or Power Wagon at this point. Those two trucks, actually the Gladiator, when that came out, started coming with a battery with longer cable lead on it. And since then, I believe the trucks have actually been coming with the longer cable lead as well. And it looks like Axial is going to be switching everything over to the Spectrum electronics, which the battery that comes with has the longer cable lead. So after that, you just put the body on, and you're good to go. When you're putting the body on, I forgot about this. You may need to loosen the screws on one side of this tray just a little bit, so that you can spread the frame rails apart a little bit to fit the body mount into place. And then you can just tighten this back down, and it will actually hold. If you're running 2 screws on either side of this tray, it will actually hold the body in place. But just run your 2 screws back. When all this is done, you should have 4 screws left over. If you have more than that, you've forgotten to put screws somewhere. The 4 screws are literally going to be from the suspension mounts, or the upper suspension mounts that were taken off. So other than that, you should have all of the screws that you took off of here are going to be reused to mount everything back on the truck. And then actually the very last thing to do is going to be to do your body mount. This one is just kind of a trial and error, because it is slightly different positioning than the stock part. And just like all these screws, just be careful with how tight you go on these, because you can strip these holes out if you're not careful. Once you feel it start to get tight, you're pretty much as tight as you need to be. With how much bite this material has on the screws, they're not going to back out of the material. Once they start to get tight, even if they're a little bit loose, they're not going to back out of the material. With this kit, depending on how you have it set up, you can raise or lower your ride height if you want to. You can change what type of angle you want your shocks at. If you want to have a little bit less spring rate on there and have the springs do a little less work but have a lot more articulation. With this particular truck, if you go too far, you get a lot of body rub even with small tires. These are the stock tires, and they still rub the body even from or fresh out of the box. So there's a lot of adjustability with it, and a lot of options for how you can run things. Works great with longer travel suspension as well. Because it gives you a lot of extra mounting options, so you're not going super high on your ride height with the stock parts. Quick note that I forgot, in particular with the Power Wagon. This one's heavily modified, has a lot of extra parts, but the basic idea is still the same. This tray can actually be moved forward or back based on where you want it mounted on here and how much room you need. Oop, let me get you in the camera. So these holes allow it to move forward and back. There's 4 different mounting holes that are on here, and they're spaced in a particular way so you can get a little bit more adjustment out of it for this. Same kind of goes with the shorter chassis as well, but it's especially useful on here because if you are running something like I did a rear-facing brushless motor setup on here, it did not have the clearance to run that, so I had to slide it back slightly. Also on the front with these inner fenders, there you have to trim straight up right here, as well as the tab that's on the back here inside this fender. Your mounting tab still stays the same, front and rear. Nothing gets trimmed there, and only part of your front intersection gets trimmed. But that way you still have access to all of your mounting holes on the front. And it clears perfectly fine with everything else that's on here. So that was cool that it still worked with these inner fenders, and I didn't have to come up with an inner fender option for it. But yeah, I think that's it. The kit is honestly really versatile. It works with any, like I said, any stock SCX24 frame rails, as long as they have that C channel so that it can slide into it. If you're doing it with flat rails, it will make the truck slightly wider. So you got to be careful with that because that'll set your suspension out, or your shocks out farther up top, which could cause binding. And also it kind of just messes with how everything locks into place, so it doesn't make it as rigid. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please either message me or leave them down in the comments and I will get back to you on that. Like the video if you like this type of content. And if you don't like it, dislike the video and let me know why. It's always helping me improve with my videos that I'm making for the channel.